Hello, welcome to Live with Anton Gunn. It is Wednesday, 2 p.m. East Coast time, 11 a.m. Pacific. To everybody in the Central Time Zone and the Mountain Time Zone, it's time to get in where you fit in. So today's conversation is going to be about the word equity. Now, when I say equity, there are a lot of people who are using this word today, but so many people don't understand what the term means. I will never forget the first time I raised the term equity when I was speaking to a group of physicians. I literally was presenting to a group of doctors. These are people who went to school for a very long time. They went to undergrad for 4 years. They got their master's degree. When I say master's degree, they went to medical school for 4 years. And then after those 4 years of medical school, they did 4 years of a residency. Okay. That's 12 years of education and learning how to be a doctor. And then some of them might have done 2 more years of a fellowship of some sort if they were in a specialty. And so these are very smart people. They can learn a whole lot. They understand a whole lot. They can read a whole lot. They're well versed. I've also had this conversation with some attorneys, people who went to law school and got Juris Doctor's degrees. And this person, this physician, if you will, when I started talking about equity, you know what he said to me? He said to me, when I hear the word equity, the only thing I think about is how much equity do I have in my home? And then I had someone else say, the only thing I can think about is how much equity I own in the business. Do I own 5% of this business or 50% of this business? How much equity do I have in the business? Then the physician further illustrated his lack of understanding of the term equity when he says, when I think of equity, I think of, how much equity have I earned in my home over time? Do I have $100,000 of equity, $50,000 of equity? How much can I borrow against? And that's when I knew I had a problem. Now, it would be funny if I was telling you I had this conversation in 2000, or I had this conversation in 1998, or I had this conversation in 1995. No, I had this conversation in the last 5 years. So I know you may be like me saying, well, Anton, to be honest with you, I don't know what equity is either. And I wouldn't be mad at you. I wouldn't be mad at you because there's so many people who are throwing the term around that so many people don't understand. And so what I want to do today is two things. Number one, I'm going to talk very briefly about what equity is and how you should think about equity as a leader in your workplace. Where are some signs to identify where you might have inequities in your workplace? But most importantly, what I really want to talk about is how do you build an equitable workplace? How do you elevate equity, prioritize equity to keep it in a way that your workplace is equitable for all, that it is inclusive for all, that it is fair for all, a workplace that works for all? I want to talk about that. So I'm going to give you 5 priorities to build a workplace that is just and fair and equitable for all. So we're going to talk about how you as a leader can elevate equity in your workplace. But before I do that, I want to make sure that you understand equity. Before I get to the priorities, I want to make sure you understand equity. Now, when I break this down to you, you're going to be like, oh, so that's it? Yeah, that's it. I want to break it down to you, and I'm going to make it easy for you to understand equity. So, and to do that, I'm going to use an example. I literally just talked to a senior level leader in a large academic hospital system. Okay. This is a large organization with lots of employees, plus 10,000 employees that take care of patients across the board. Okay. And this person oversees a division that really is focused on what they call helping people to get out of the hospital. It's really, discharge planning, or you might want to call it care transitions. So let's say you get hospitalized in a hospital and you've been there for 5 days. And then the 5 days are up and the doctor says, you're going to go home. I'm going to turn you over to nurse case management who will manage the discharge process, which is discharging you from the hospital to get you home. Okay. So they do a lot of work. So they call the durable medical equipment people. They also may call, somebody to build a ramp on your house if you're in a wheelchair. They may do all of these wraparound services to make sure that it's easy for you to get out of the hospital, go home, and take care of your wounds. So, like if you need wound care, you need someone to come to your house to dress your wounds or to change your wounds. Well, as a part of that discharge planning process or part of that care transitions process, this leader's team will be fully involved in helping to make those decisions. Now, why am I going deep into this? Okay, so let me just break it down to you. There are two types of people who work inside of the discharge planning process or who work in care transitions. And when I mean two types, two different types of professionals. On one hand, you have nurse case managers. These are people who are clinical. They know nursing. They know how to take care of the bedside patients and they know the medical terminology. They know all of these things. Nurse case management. And then on the other side, you have social workers. These are people who understand what wraparound services you need. They got the phone numbers to the people who build ramps. They got the phone number to the durable medical equipment people. They understand the problems that you might have 5 days after discharge when you're at home and you can't get to the grocery store or you can't get to the pharmacy. So social workers and nurse case managers work together. And in some places, they pretty much do the exact same job to get patients taken care of when they're discharging out of the hospital and they're going home. So you got two people who do the same job and they work well together most times. And they work with each other so much that they know what each other does. But here's what I want you to understand, that in a lot of hospitals, even though you got two people who do the same job for the same patient population, they work in the same division, they have the same supervisor, they have the same everything other than their credentials. They have the same everything other than their credentials. The social worker is sometimes paid a whole lot less than the nurse case manager. The social worker might be paid 20, 30, 40% less than the nurse case manager. So let me tell you, if somebody is sitting beside you every day doing the same job that you're doing for the same population of customers or patients or whatever, and the person beside you is making 30 to 40% more than you are, that is an inequity. Now, I don't even have to put this in a personified position, but I can tell you that we know national data that shows this. If you are a woman who has a role in an organization and there is a man who has the same role that does the same job that you do, that you're sometimes paid 72 cents for every dollar that that man makes. So let's do the math. There's a 28% inequity if a man makes $1 and a woman makes 72 cents. There is a 28% inequity in those roles. So I just gave you two positions and I gave you a gender space of inequity. But I will tell you that in your organization right now, you have inequity. It exists somewhere. Somebody is being paid less. Somebody is doing more work and not being rewarded for it. Somebody has perks and benefits and privileges that other people don't have. And yes, some people have better outcomes because they're treated differently than others. All of these are definitions around the inequities that might exist. So the reason why I want to start with that definition, that's a crude, rudimentary definition. Like if we had a whole conversation on health equity, I would be talking to you 5 months deep and explaining health equity, that you can have two people who are the same age, same job, same income, same background, same insurance. But if one of those persons happened to be a person of color and the other one happened to be white, well, they're going to get different treatment in delivery of their healthcare services if they were in a hospital. That if they were business owners, two people own the same type of business, and one happens to be of a different race or a different gender than the other person is likely to get a loan to expand their business. So there's inequities in all kinds of industries. But here's where I want to zero in. I want to talk about the inequity in your workplace, the inequity and how people are treated at work, how people are valued at work. And I want to give you 5 priorities if you want to build an equitable workplace that works for all, a place where everybody feels valued, they feel respected, they feel included, they feel visible, and most importantly, they have been unleashed to operationalize your mission. That because there's no inequities in the way, that they feel free to do their job to the best of their ability to help the organization be successful, to hit all of its bottom line goals and objectives. So here are the 5 priorities, and I'm going to give them to you. And I'm going to give them to you quickly and clearly so you can see it. So priority number 1, if you want to elevate equity and build a workplace that works for all, you need to develop socially conscious leaders. I'm going to say it again. You need to develop socially conscious leaders. Now, when I say develop socially conscious leaders, I want you to understand that most organizations don't have socially conscious leaders. Let me tell you what they have. They have leaders who fall into one of 3 categories. Overwhelming majority of organizations have leaders that fall into one of 3 categories. Category number 1 are the leaders who are living in oblivion. Now, when I mean living in oblivion, these are the leaders who show up every day, think they're doing their job, but they have no idea that inequity exists in the organization. They just don't know. They're the people who don't even know what the definition of equity is, but many times they might hear that definition and they will say to themselves, well, that doesn't happen here. That doesn't happen here. Nobody here is being paid differently than other people. Nobody here is being treated differently than other people. They are naive at best, but more specifically, they're living in oblivion. And when you're living in oblivion, you can't fix what's wrong because you don't know what's wrong. You just can't. So that's about 50% of leaders in your organization. That's category 1, is 50% of them are living in oblivion. Category number 2 are the people who are stuck. They suffer paralysis by analysis. That they know inequity is real inside your organization. They've seen it with their own eyes. They maybe even have experienced it, but they don't do anything about it. You know why they don't do anything about it? Because they think it's not their job, their responsibility, or that they don't have the power to fix the inequity. They will say stuff like, man, I think it's screwed up that I work in healthcare where the workforce is 78% women, but 90% of the people who are in the senior most leadership positions are men. I wish I can fix that, but I can't do nothing about that. That's a global problem across the industry. I can't fix every hospital, so I know it's screwed up, but I ain't gonna do nothing about it. That's the second cohort of people who suffer paralysis by analysis. They know better, but they don't do better. And the third cohort of people are the people who are about 10%. So that second group is about 35%. This final group is about 10%. These are the people who see the inequity. They know it's messed up, know it's wrong, have the greatest ability to do something about it, but they make an excuse of why they can't fix the inequity. They say stuff like, you know what? That's going to cost us more money if we fix this problem. Well, if we fix this problem, it's going to hurt somebody else. Or they might even say, you know what? I like it staying like it is. We figured this thing out. We're comfortable. We got the ship running in the right direction. Why you want to come in and upset the apple cart talking about equity, Anton? Why do you want to change things? I mean, we just got the place to good morale. Why would you want to change things up? That third group are toxic, in my opinion. That you mean to tell me you'll see stuff jacked up, broken, wrong, failed in an organization and think because you're comfortable, that you feel good, that you are winning financially, that it's okay to leave it like that? If that's you, you are the problem. You have no social conscience. You're not aware of what's wrong, and that what's wrong is you. So when I say develop socially conscious leadership, you don't want to have your leaders in the 50% who are living in oblivion. You don't want to have them in the 35% that know something is wrong, but are paralyzed to do anything about it. And you definitely don't want to have any leaders who are in that 10%, who see it's jacked up, but they like to perpetuate the injustice by making these excuses as the reason why it would be more harmful to fix the inequity than to just leave the inequity be. Instead, you want to develop leaders who ask insightful questions about what's wrong. And I talked to one today. That leader in the organization literally told me that they asked the question. They asked, are our teams being paid equitably? And they noticed that the social workers weren't being paid equitably. So they literally went on an intentional process to raise the salaries of social workers. Before they did this, their turnover rate was 50%. That means 50% of the people were quitting a job because they had equity in their workplace. But just in 18 months, that turnover rate went from 50% down to 22%. They cut it in half, more than half, because this leader had a social conscience to ask the questions and to understand what's unfair, unjust in our organization. So priority number one, if you want to elevate equity and create a workplace for all, you got to become a socially conscious leader. And if you don't know how to do that, I can teach you how to do that because that's what I do. I'm an expert in socially conscious leadership. So let me get to priority number two. Priority number two is that you have to become non-negotiable about inclusivity. You have to build an inclusive organization. That means inviting people to the conversation about equity. People who you know are experiencing the inequity. People who may have some insight in the inequity. You have to be non-negotiable about being inclusive. Building an inclusive culture that allows people to speak truth to power, candidly, frankly, in a way that you ain't gonna get offended. And guess what? You're gonna get offended by anything if you're sensitive. But if you want to be an equitable organization, you gotta be non-negotiable about including everybody, every type of voice into the conversation or discussion. So that's the second priority. If you want to elevate equity, is you gotta be non-negotiable about being inclusive. The third point or the third priority is a step beyond inclusivity, which is inclusivity is inviting people to the conversation. This third priority is empowering people to voice their experiences, their challenges, their opportunities, inviting them to give you feedback on what you need to change. Like there's no point of saying, I'm aware of the injustice. I'm going to include you to the meeting, but I'm not going to ask you your opinion when you come to the table. I just want you to watch. Like they're coming to work to watch a movie. They're not coming to work to watch a movie. They're coming to work to see what you are going to do to make this workplace work for all. So you need to empower their voice. You need to be open to hearing the feedback and empowering them to help you to make decisions on how you make it equitable. Like I'll never forget when I was a student athlete at the University of South Carolina, I really believed that student athletes needed to get paid. Now it was a long time ago in the 1990s. There was no NIL, no transfer portal, and college athletes couldn't earn money. We were shut out. And because there was nobody willing to listen to a conversation to me or with me or other athletes about how we make college football more equitable, I used to be a rebel rouser. I used to be a whistleblower because it was so unfair that they wouldn't give me a place internally to raise my voice and be a champion for change. Because that's the other part of the priority. It's not just empowering people's voices, but being a champion for change. You got to be a champion for change. You got to be the one that stands up and says, you know what? I think it's totally unfair that our university is making millions of dollars every year on the backs of student athletes, and they don't get to share in the profits of the success of the entity. And I believe that we need to change the system and that they need to be paid. So in your workplace, is there something that is unfair, that is inequitable, that you need to become the champion of change for? Do you understand the change management process? Do you understand 21st century change management? And I will say you probably don't, because it ain't like it used to be. You got to get maximum buy-in on the change. And that's a process. One that I also teach and that I have as a course inside of my leadership learning library. So the third priority, be a champion for change. Empower other people to bring their voice to the table. Now, the fourth priority, if you want to elevate equity and build your workplace, is one that is simple, but it's not easy to do. And that is to develop mentorship opportunities and sponsorship opportunities. Now, I know some of you probably thinking, that ain't hard, Anton, mentorship and sponsorship. Let me be clear. It's really hard because you got to have people who want to mentor. I've seen so many organizations who try to establish mentorship programs, and you got all of the people who want mentorship, but you got nobody willing to sign up to be a mentor. Like, you can't be mentored without the mentor. So you have to have a culture in your organization where you and your leadership team wants to mentor people. They want to mentor people, that they're passionate about developing the people who have been locked out, priced out, and shut out of leadership opportunities. The people who haven't had the opportunities for growth and development. The people who never get to go to the conferences. The people who never get a professional development budget. You got to become a mentor to those folks. And can't just be one person. You got to have a program that lines up how to build a consistent investment in developing the people around you who don't have those opportunities. Because particularly when you look like me, or you might be a woman or fit some dimension of diversity, some other dimension of diversity, you don't get those mentorship opportunities. You don't. I remember working with a client organization, and they told me about this physician who literally his job was to train residents. So he's training all of these residents on how to be better doctors, inviting them to participate in surgeries and do all kinds of other things. But you know what I learned very quickly? If you were a woman physician, or if you were a physician of color, you didn't get invited to his house for scotch on weekends. You didn't get to go out with him on his boat. You didn't get to, meet his family and his kids. He only invited the white male physicians. So if you were a woman or a person of color, you didn't get the opportunity for the private time to be mentored. That's an inequity. That you got 10 residents and 7 of them are men, straight men, and you got 3 that are women, LGBTQ plus, maybe a person of color, but you're inviting the guys to the house for scotch, on your boat with you, hanging out with you and your family to watch the Super Bowl, and you leave the rest of them out. That's an inequity. So if you want to create a workplace for all, you got to build a mentorship program that is inclusive. Now, the other side of that coin, not just mentorship, is sponsorship. Sponsorship is very different than mentorship. Sponsorship is saying that, hey, when you get the phone call that we're looking for a director of marketing, and before we post this position, we're coming to you to see if there's anybody that you know that might be a good fit for this position. Whose name is coming out of your mouth? Is it one of your mentees? Is it that person of color? Is it that woman? Is it that person who never gets the opportunity for advancement and promotion? Are you sponsoring them, not just putting a name for it, but saying, not only is this person good, I'm willing to vouch for them. I'm going to write a letter of recommendation. I'm going to fight for you to get this job. That's what sponsorship is. It's fighting for your people that you're mentoring. So if you want to make equity elevated in your organization, you want to make your workplace a just place for all, then you got to prioritize mentorship and sponsorship. That's number 4. Now, the 5th priority, as I close, is really simple. You have to hold yourself accountable and hold your organization accountable for the first 4 priorities, which is you can't tolerate people being blind to the inequities that exist in your organization. That you got to create a continuous improvement process so people are learning about the inequities, because you might fix inequities in one area, and I've seen this happen 100 times over, that we see that we don't have people of color in a leadership role. So we prioritize putting African Americans, Hispanic, Latinos, Native Americans into leadership positions, but don't think about gender. And so what you end up happening is you go from being a racially exclusive group to a gender exclusive group. So then you learn about that new problem, that we got a gender problem now, and you need to fix that. And then once you fix the gender problem, you realize that, you know what, we have a problem because we don't have diversity of professional experience. We got a bunch of, JDs in the room, or a bunch of MBAs in the room, and we don't have any social workers, because I got a social work degree, and I can tell you right now that I know very few social workers who've ever been in a C-suite room, who sit at the table with leadership, who got MBAs and bring their experience and skill set. So you got to have a accountability process around continuously to improve when you discover inequities. You have an accountability process that if anybody's not holding people in, being inclusive and not holding space for everybody or creating space for everybody, that you're non-negotiable, that you will not tolerate this. And you're willing to reprimand people, counsel people, coach people, and ultimately terminate people for not prioritizing inclusivity. You need to have an accountability framework around empowering voices and change management. If the people are not following the change management process, you can't stay here. You got to go. We believe in change management. We believe in empowering voices. You got to prioritize the accountability around that. That's continuous learning and growth. And again, the last piece is you have to have accountability around that mentorship and sponsorship piece, meaning that you got to do it first. You need to have 7 mentors. I'm going to tell you that right now. You need to have your magnificent 7. 7 people that you mentor. And they should fit every dimension of diversity that you have in your organization, and some that you need to have in your organization, but don't. But you need to have 7 people that you're mentoring, developing them over a year time. Don't just mentor them for 5 minutes. You mentor them for a year, at least a year, maybe 3 years. But I'm going to say at least 12 months of mentorship, meeting with them on a regular basis. And what's a regular basis? Once a month. If you're not meeting with your mentees once a month, you ain't a good mentor. So you got to start. Be the example of the change you want to see in the world. So that's it. That's what I got for you. This is how you build a workplace that works for all. This is how you elevate equity, is that you prioritize developing socially conscious leaders. Number 2, you make inclusivity non-negotiable in your organization. Number 3, you are empowering other people's voices and leading change management in this area. Number 4, you are prioritizing mentorship and sponsorship. And number 5, you holding yourself and the entire organization accountable for its continuous growth and improvement on those 4 areas. That's what I got for you today. Now, if you want to read more about this, you can read it on my blog at antongunn.com/blog. I put a link in the description of this video for you to have it. But I gave you the goods right here. If you just listen to the video, you got it. You're going to figure it out. You're going to make it happen. Or you're not going to make it happen. And in the 21st century, there is no room, no place for a leader like you that does not want to prioritize equity. And now that you know what it is, I'm expecting you to do it. Everybody have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Take care.